Welcome to Unstereotypical Stories by C.F. Edwards. You're listening to Mora, Book 1.
Chapter 2. The double seat all the way in the back was empty. She hurried to grab it before someone else would. Once she reached her desired seat, she plopped down on the hard cushioned seat, placed her backpack on the floor in front of her, and peered down the aisle to see if her peers were watching. They were not. They had their heads glued to their mobile devices and tablets. Mora sighed in relief and reached into her backpack for her earbuds. She smiled when her fingers touched the square case that contained them. These two little devices were her sanctuary. They provided her refuge in a time of trouble. She placed her earbuds in her ear and listened to her favorite classic solemn R&B jam, Borderline by Brandy. Its smooth bass line and intricate strings provided just the right amount of tranquility she needed. She closed her eyes and listened as the drumming of the raindrops moved in sync with the bass of the song. Her wish had come true. She had her own seat and was uninterrupted. Mora placed her head against the window and put her feet on the empty cushion beside her, cautious not to mess up her hair or smear her makeup. Her cell phone buzzed in her pocket, and she froze. She had a sound inkling of who it was because she always got a notification on her cell phone after a nightmare or ghost sighting. Mora ignored it, but it kept vibrating. She powered it off and put it back in her pocket.
It's just a coincidence,
she thought. Mora was overjoyed when the bus driver closed his door and the bus moved. It relieved her because the longer he stayed, the greater probability she would have to share her seat. Mora contemplated checking the text message just in case it was her father calling to say he was in the parking lot, but had a powerful feeling in the pit of her stomach that it was another warning telling her to be quiet. She ignored it and put her attention on her music. She raised the volume of her music to its peak. Its loudness kept her mind focused on the present. She noticed that when she gave her attention to things she enjoyed, the dreams appeared to be less powerful and the thoughts surrounding them less frequent. One of her classmates nudged his friend, stood up, and pointed to a girl running alongside of the bus. She was hitting the door with her fist and yelling at the top of her lungs.
"Wait! Wait!"
she yelled. Mora looked out of her window. She saw a large, beefy frame holding an umbrella trying to catch the bus.
"Please don't open the door. I really don't want to share my seat today,"
Mora thought to herself. The bus driver stopped the bus and opened his doors. Candace made her way onto the already crowded bus, huffing and heaving as if she were about to cough up a lung. Mora sunk down in her seat and hoped that she had not seen her.
"When did she return to school?"
Candace was a burly girl with a smooth, cinnamon skin tone. She wore her hair in long cornrows down the middle of her back and had on the same nylon sweats she often wore. They made an awkward swishing sound that always pre-announced her arrival. Her shoelaces were untied, and her shoes leaned over when she walked. The best word to describe her was unkempt. She looked like a grown woman in kids' clothes. She was a husky, meaty girl. Although Mora did not envy Candace, she always wondered how she gained so much weight because despite her own voracious appetite, she remained thin and bony. Candace smacked her gum loudly and always appeared to have enough gum for 3 people within those fat cheeks. She desperately needed a dentist, and everyone knew it because every time she opened her mouth, she unknowingly revealed a plethora of cavities. She was the school bully, and everyone followed her commands, or they would face the wrath of her fists, righty and lefty. As she walked down the aisle, people moved their backpacks to offer her a seat. Normally, she would randomly push people or smack freshmen upside the head, but something was different about her today. She had a smile on her face. As she walked past everyone, she smiled and nodded her head. It made everyone nervous. Her frown was typically a scowl, and she uttered unkind words. This fresh behavior change was strange and sparked curiosity among the students. They whispered and talked amongst themselves as they turned their undivided attention toward her. Candace arrived at the back seat where Mora sat and waited for her to speak. She looked down at Mora with her feet and both seats and her head against the window. She pondered her words before speaking. Billy moved his blonde locks from his face and turned around in his seat to get a better look at Candace.
This is about to get interesting,
he whispered to the girl sitting next to him.
More than interesting,
she replied. Candace twiddled her thumbs and nervously bit her bottom lip before speaking.
Is this seat taken?
Candace asked politely. Mora had her eyes closed and her face turned toward the window. She tried her best to ignore Candace and let her music occupy all her attention. She slowly bobbed her head to the beat. Candace moved a step further. She lightly tapped Mora's shoe, and immediately Mora's eyes opened.
Here we go.
Mora moved her feet and took her scarf from around her neck and wiped the droplets of water and any debris from off the seat and scooted as far to the window as possible. There was a prolonged silence between the two girls. Mora looked straight ahead. All the students on the bus stared at them as if they were spectators at a boxing match waiting for their favorite fighter to take their first hit. Mora subtly took out her earbuds, clasped them in her palm, and held them in front of her.
Nice earbuds,
stated Candace. Mora rolled her eyes and sighed heavily. She opened up her hand and threw the earbuds on the seat next to Candace. Mora folded her arms and leaned her head back against the window.
You were just going to take them anyway,
Mora whispered. Candace kindly handed the earbuds back to Mora.
I want to apologize for how I treated you.
Mora lifted her head off the bus window and turned towards Candace. She pushed her glasses a little further down her button nose to get a clearer view of her facial expression. She was unfamiliar with Candace's kinder, more human-like tone.
Excuse me?
Mora replied. Candace took a deep breath and started again.
I'm sorry for picking on you. It was wrong. Could you find it in your heart to forgive me?
She asked. She stared at the floor to hide the tears that welled in her eyes.
Is this a joke?
Mora asked. Candace wiped her eyes and scooted close to Mora. She wanted to have a private conversation. She turned, expecting someone to be behind her.
It's not a joke. Something terrible happened to me when I was away and made me realize the error of my ways.
Candace grasped Mora by the arm and wrapped her large fingers around Mora's fragile wrist.
You need to forgive me, Mora, for your own good.
Mora pulled her arm to get out of Candace's grasp, but she was too strong for her.
Let me go. You're hurting me,
Mora replied. Candace quickly released Mora when she realized that she had grabbed her too strongly.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you.
Mora snatched her backpack from off the ground and stood up.
You meant to hurt me because you're a bully. I'm tired of you putting your hands on me and stealing my things,
Mora yelled.
I really didn't mean it this time. I'm trying to protect you,
Candace replied.
Protect me? The only person I need protection from is you. Now move over and let me out,
Mora demanded. More students on the bus turned around in their seats to watch the heated argument between Mora and Candace. Most of them had heard rumors about brave students standing up to Candace, but had never seen someone talk back, let alone at Candace in person. Candace inched closer toward Mora before uttering her next words.
If you don't forgive me, dreadful things will happen to you,
Candace whispered softly.
What are you gonna do? Eat me?
Mora taunted. The once quiet bus burst into extreme laughter. Candace's smile faded. Her cinnamon cheeks were now scarlet red. She squinted her eyes, clenched her fist, and bit her bottom lip. The last person who had spoken to Candace in that tone, Jimmy Dalton, was beat up so badly he was hospitalized. Candace closed her eyes and breathed slow breaths. They watched as her enormous chest rose and fell with each inhale and exhale. The students' eyes widened as they whispered amongst themselves. They speculated on how Candace would beat Mora this time. Then something unexpected happened. Candace unclenched her fist, and in a soft tone, she repeated the mantra.
I love everyone, and everyone loves me.
Candace continued her positive affirmations until her mood shifted. She opened her eyes and stared at Mora for a few seconds and pondered how she would proceed. Mora's behavior conflicted her. On one hand, she did not want Mora to win the argument and risk being humiliated in front of her peers. But she knew that if she acted as she previously had, there would be consequences. Dire ones. Candace moved out of the way and let her leave. Mora put her earbuds in her pocket and walked away. The students were astonished that Candace let Mora talk back, and disappointed there would be no physical exchange of fists. Mora was pleased that she had stood up for herself. She walked down the bus aisle with her head held high and her back straight. When she reached the front of the bus, she tapped the bus driver on the shoulder.
Could you open the door now?
Mora asked. Are you sure you want to walk in this weather? The bus driver replied.
It beats sitting on the bus with her, and I'm only a couple 100 feet from school,
Mora replied. Suit yourself, the bus driver replied. He opened the door. Mora turned toward the back of the bus and gave Candace the middle finger. Billy turned towards the girl next to him and whispered,
Little Mora just punked Big Candace.
As soon as Candace heard the response, her breathing became heavy and her face turned from light cinnamon to a scarlet red. She jumped up from her seat and charged toward the front of the bus at full speed toward Mora. But as soon as she reached the middle of the bus, she slipped on her shoestring and fell on her back. The students on the bus burst into roaring laughter while Mora ran off the bus and onto the wet pavement. The thought of Candace falling on the bus made her smile.
That's what her fat butt gets,
Mora whispered to herself.
If you don't want to wait 2 weeks for the next full episode, you can get the audiobook and ebook on Amazon.com. Episodes are released on the 1st and the 15th of every month. Sign up to my email list to get free stories and to find out when my next unstereotypical story is releasing. Happy listening.